Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So as usual today, we're gonna go over the market and an absolute bloodbath. Shouldn't be too surprising, mainly because again, I always say Mondays follow Fridays, and Friday was an absolute bloodbath. And as somewhat expected, I guess, you never know for sure, but it's probable that Mondays follow Fridays. More or less, it kind of rhymes with it essentially, right? And since Friday was a bloodbath, makes sense today was a bloodbath as well. But nonetheless, let's go over the market, see what happened, and essentially what we can expect for the rest of the week. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. Now keep in mind, guys, just this is not again just Tesla related or anything. Pretty much literally just everything is in a fairly deep red today. I mean, you have the SPY down almost 4%, the QQQ down almost 5% on the day. That is like abysmal. Like that's that's abysmal, man. That's ridiculously low. That's painful. That is just straight up painful. So Tesla, down with 7%. Again, relative to the QQQ, not that bad. I mean, honestly, Tesla should have been down closer to 10% almost, maybe like 9%. I guess it is what it is. A slight outperformance. Not it doesn't feel like it. Absolutely not. But technically it is, right? So it is what it is. Got to take the small wins where you can get them at this point, let's be honest. And essentially on top of this, with the SPY closing where it is, it officially has closed pretty much in a bear market. So we'll go over, Tesla and the main indices and all that stuff together. But jumping straight into Tesla first and foremost, of course, guys. So at $647 is our closing price and 24 cents. So yeah, we essentially broke back into this trend line, which, as I said, I don't want to not break back into this trend line. Number one, I don't want to see that happen. We did, so that's not good. We essentially bounced more or less right from the trend line once again, and this trend line over here, you can see that I have drawn from up here, right? We're kind of in this one as well, more or less, that we keep going in and out of. So we kind of bounced off of both of these trend lines today. You can see here. So we're right back into this situation once again, this kind of dead zone almost, you can say. On top of that, the pattern that I was personally hopeful, or at least hoping, would play out and be a bullish pattern was the head and shoulders pattern, this being the shoulder, head, shoulder. Unfortunately, this market just has no strength in it whatsoever. Pattern completely fell apart. The second, and I told you this before, guys, the second 680 breaks, the pattern essentially falls apart in my opinion. And we essentially opened the day below that. We opened the day at like 666 or something like that, came back up, tested 680, you can see here on the candle, pretty much in the morning, actually, I think it was roughly, yeah. As we opened up, we came up, tested the 680, obviously got rejected because, like I said, 680 was a nice support. I really want that to hold. Not only did it not hold, but we went up, touched it, and got rejected. Sure sign that, this is not good. Let's just say that. Not good. Not what we want to be seeing, absolutely. So, sometimes, guys, it kind of just is what it is. Now, let's go over the other things. I want to quickly hide the drawing so we can get a better visual here, but I want to go ahead and start showing the EMA, right? The 21 EMA. This is a decent sign, I've said before, of a reversal. So essentially, if you ever want to start thinking about, okay, well, when the hell are we reversing? Like, when can we finally stop just plummeting off a cliff? It feels like at this point almost every single day, which we kind of are almost, right? Let's be honest. But nonetheless, when is it going to stop? When does the pain end, right? Well, the pain, in my opinion, will end if we start consistently closing above this line, the 21 EMA. Once we consistently start closing above that, not just one candle, but like 3 candles, let's say, then I think we can start celebrating and start thinking about, okay, well, now where the hell are we going to go to upwards? How high can we go? Until that happens, though, I don't think we're going to be going any higher than this line, or not much higher, at least. At the very least, at the very best, I can see us right now probably going back to around maybe like 750. That, in my opinion, for the short term, is probably like the relative best case scenario for now. And then potentially get rejected from that general level once again. But another thing to look at, of course, is going to be the 5-day moving average. Of course, we just substantially got rejected by it on Friday, and then we, of course, plummeted off of that as well. Another thing to look at, of course, is going to be the 10-day moving average, which is also a decent one. And you can see we are also well below that as well. So really not a whole lot of, good news here. I'll be completely honest, guys, not a whole lot. There is some good news. I will bring up some good news. There is some stuff that I'm looking at that, is giving me a sliver of hope once again. After today's movement, of course, so we'll go over that. But before we do, of course, I want to look at my favorite bands. And you can see on the daily, right, as we were hugging the bottom part of this Bollinger Band, we came back up. The band's reset again, but since we have no drawings here, it's fine. The band's reset. We came back up to the middle, to the mean, if you will, the average of the band, kind of, danced around it as it usually does. Kept trying to go up higher, but then we just kind of kept, we essentially, this middle band kept being, the line rather, kept being essentially magnets. And not only did we finally go below it, but we kind of got rejected here on Friday, closed below it, and then, that essentially is what started the pain train. Now, is this the low? Are we just going to be bouncing straight from here? Now, of course, as usual, with this market, especially when it's this volatile and this essentially, bear market, it's extremely hard to predict. It's very possible. However, with that being said, I actually wouldn't be surprised if there's a tiny bit more pain, very short term, probably even tomorrow, ahead for Tesla. And the reason I say that is because this is just a really, really strange close to me. Like closing over here is just really weird to me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It just feels like we're kind of dangling our feet in the water. You know what I mean? Very, very kind of strange close. So with that being said, personally, I've been buying. I have been buying because on my smaller account, I completely sold out. I took a bit of a hit earlier, but then I bought back in, and then that's when everything tanked. And then thankfully we had one moment where it went back up, essentially to exactly where I bought, and I took that opportunity to sell, and thank goodness I did. So I was full cash in that account pretty much on today's open, and I started buying. I bought 20 shares, but I still have another 20 shares I want to buy. But I'm not buying those shares until we drop what I think potentially is going to be somewhere around the 630 to 625 level. Now, what I personally would want to see, something that would be, potentially bullish. Again, like any pattern, it can fall apart, but a pattern that, can be forming, that can be, a nice bullish pattern, is a double bottom or a W, right? So you go 1, 2, and then go back up, right? So it's a double bottom. It's the easiest way of thinking about it, right? Which is why I wouldn't be surprised, based on this close, how it's just kind of weirdly dangling like this. Fairly solid red candle, just showing, a lot of sell pressure. Of course, the volume is still fairly decent on the sell pressure, etc., etc. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually revisit, this kind of 630 to 625, between 630 to 620, somewhere in that level. Wouldn't be surprised if we revisit that, maybe 625, as the kind of the average there, and essentially, bounce off the same spot that we bounced here. That would not shock me whatsoever. And I've been saying that if ever 680 breaks, that I personally would think that, this kind of 625-ish level is the very first level I would personally be paying attention to as like the first major kind of support bounce target, essentially. If that breaks, then you have I have all these lines here. You guys can see that I have drawn. If 620 breaks, then it's 600. 600 breaks, then about 570-ish. If that breaks, then we're off to the races at 550. Now the issue is if 550 breaks, that's when, in my opinion, it can get quite ugly. And in my opinion, that's where we can potentially visit 500 extremely quickly from 550. So that would be like a fast drop. That alone right there would be. Don't forget, when we get lower down here, each drop becomes. Like 50-point drop here is not the same as that was up there, right? It's a little bit, more intense. That in itself alone would be like a 9% drop. But if 550 ever breaks, that essentially means that I think we're going to be dropping probably to around 450. Now, personally, what do I visualize to be more or less like the worst case, right? Like, what do I see being not necessarily the worst case, but the worst case realistically, like the realistic worst case scenario? That that's it's bad, and I still consider it to be fairly worst case, but it's also fairly realistic in my opinion of happening. 450 would be my target. That would be my main target in terms of just like a realistic worst case scenario. Absolute worst case scenario will be well below that. Like an absolute worst case scenario will be like literally 200 or something like that. Like again, the chances of that happening I think are substantially pretty much non-existent, in all honesty. But there's still technically a chance, right? I would give that maybe a 3% chance, not very high at all. But I would give this chance right here, this 450. I mean, I'll give that a solid 20% chance of happening. I would not be super shocked whatsoever if sometime in a few months Tesla hits 450, somewhere around 450. That would not shock me whatsoever. Again, will it happen? I don't know for sure. No one knows. I mean, if I knew for sure, I would sell everything right now and then check back in a couple months and then just all in at 450, right? If I knew for a fact, but you don't. But nonetheless, talking about the scenario that we are currently in, there's really not a whole lot of bullish things happening. So pretty much the main thing I'll be personally looking for at the very moment is essentially a double bottom bounce around the 625 level. That would be the first thing I would personally be looking at. Now, the other thing you want to pay attention to, like I said before, is of course the SPY and the QQQ. Now, the SPY is where I kind of see some potential bullish stuff forming. Now, all in all, I mean, you get some absolute incredible gap downs here. This is just this is just brutal. These this is just insane, man. But you have some pretty massive gap downs here. The volume just hard spiking on these gap downs. You have probably just liquidations happening, margin calls left and right happening with this volume increase. That's why you always usually see this kind of fast selling pressure on red days and the volume sometimes being this aggressive because people are probably getting liquidated, margin called, etc. People are being greedy. They were too heavy in margin and essentially loaning money pretty much from the banks and whatnot. And yeah, they get wiped out. All right, it is what it is. That's why you don't want to be too greedy. You want to make sure you're chilling, not being too stupid. But nonetheless, the thing I see happening here is this kind of falling wedge that we are on the SPY, right? Where you can see we are currently getting tighter and tighter in this little wedge. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to just bounce off of here and break out. I mean, it's possible, of course. Not everything's possible. But I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere around this level we start seeing a bounce, this kind of 370-ish level. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a somewhat of a relief rally relatively soon. That would not shock me. If we somehow fall out of this wedge that we are currently into the south side, though, that'll be, first of all, surprising, number one. Number two, that'll be really damn bad, especially if it holds underneath it as well, right? Like I said, I have that 3-day rule. If we maybe have 1 day, it's okay, whatever, we can maybe recover the next day, fine. But if that just happens and we just don't show any strength of recovering, especially, man, that's just going to be brutal. But nonetheless, I see us currently kind of trading within this wedge for the next foreseeable future, in my opinion, probably the next month or two at least. So that's why I expect to see potential, bounce, maybe a relief rally, maybe fill some gaps quickly. I don't think we'll fill this gap anytime soon, because that would imply us breaking out of this wedge unless it happens essentially in the next week or two, which it can. I don't think it will, though. At the very least, I do think we'll fill this gap up here, which is around that 390. I definitely think that can happen. I think the possibility of that is not that low at all. But nonetheless, I would expect something like that to happen, potentially, fall down, go back up, fill up this gap, and then most likely make a new low, and then maybe make one more touch point somewhere down here. So that's kind of what I would personally be seeing. Like, assuming this is the bottom, right? What you can do is you can go from here and go to here and get a decent idea as to where we can potentially bounce. And you can see the 0.382 Fibonacci is like perfectly aligned, like pretty much picture perfectly aligned with the gap fill on this candle. So that kind of makes sense right there. So I personally wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of relief rally soon, maybe after the Wednesday FOMC meeting. Maybe they say something, the market relief rallies, probably get some juicy new bull traps set up, and we potentially go up and just gap fill this pretty quickly. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, right? Same thing, very similar concept with the QQQ. It has a little bit more room to the downside, but it's pretty much there as well. Same concept in my opinion, right? We're taking a look at the Fibonacci here if you want as well, but I expect it to be relatively similar. So you go from the top to the bottom over here roughly, and you can see it's fairly close to it as well, right? For the gap fill. So, that wouldn't be surprising whatsoever. The final thing you also want to make sure you're looking at is, of course, the VIX, right? You can see the VIX just substantially broke out. Now, the reason I think the market might have a short-term rally is, number one, the VIX is just really overextended temporarily, right? It's just pointing straight up, and it's looking bullish. Don't get me wrong. At this point, the VIX is pretty much confirmed to be in a bull trend for the VIX, which essentially means a bear trend for the market. But the VIX essentially went in the past 3 days up 50%, which is insane, right? Which is why I wouldn't be surprised, as we get rejected over here, the VIX eventually comes back down and maybe comes over to retest this breakout. And that would coincide with a potential rally in the market, a short-term rally nonetheless, but, a rally nonetheless. That will kind of line up with that, in my opinion, before more pain ahead. So essentially, as the market will rally back up, somewhere up in this area, as a relief rally, the SPY and the QQQ, that would imply with the VIX coming back down, most likely to retest those breakouts, roughly give or take. And then as it bounces, which it probably will off these breakouts, that would also coincide with the market probably topping somewhere around these general levels, maybe even for the SPY somewhere around this level here. That would coincide with that, which then would lead to further decline and probably somewhere touch base somewhere around this 350, 360 level for the SPY while we are in this descending wedge. And then most likely, I'm hoping a breakout to the north side from there is what I would personally see happening, right? Which with Tesla would essentially be something similar as well, where we get a relief rally and then we, of course, most likely come back down. Again, my ultimate like price target, where I think it's possible, is 450, but my first target that I'm personally eyeballing is 550. What I'm currently doing, in case you're wondering, in terms of trading or positions, whatever, I again, on my smaller account, my non-taxable account, whatever you want to call it, in Canada it's called TSLA. I am buying, and I have more money to buy if we touch the 620 level, just as a trade, more of a trade, in the hopes that we can get a double bottom bounce, which I think might happen, which would line up with what I see happening currently in the VIX, SPY, and QQQ, right? That would line up fairly well in my opinion. On top of that, I also am doing on my main account, I'm still holding the shares from the 700 average, roughly, like 750 roughly. My average was for those shares. I'm still holding. I'm not worried. You know, it is what it is. But I did deploy more cash into the account to sell puts. So what I did today was actually sold the put, pretty much close to the lows of today. And I sold the put for end of July. So it's about 45 days out, which is a good time for theta to decay. And I sold the put for 575, which is this level right here, which netted me about $4,000 on that one put sold, which is pretty decent, right? I'm not complaining. I like it. I'll take it. So essentially the idea there is if Tesla falls down to this level at any time between now and the end of July, I'm essentially buying shares of Tesla at 575, and then of course you add in the amount I got from the premiums, and then you subtract that too, and that's essentially your average, which will lower it down even more. Of course, I think that'll make it around. I'll have to do the math later. I can let you guys know. I just forgot off the top of my head, but nonetheless, it would make my average lower than this for those specific shares. Or the other option is, like I think, if we do come down here and bounce. Then essentially that would essentially mean that the contract I sold would start becoming substantially less worthwhile as we start rallying potentially upwards, and then I just buy back at like a 50% discount, and then I make the difference as realized gains in profit, right? So that's essentially what I'm seeing. Other than that, you can see it's looking overall bearish. Like even if we get a rally here, guys, I really think it'll be nothing more than a bear rally. I think the fact that we broke down like this and the RSI is looking fairly bearish. Like everything is looking like overall, we're still in a downtrend. We're still going to be looking for probably lower lows. Honestly, I don't think the low is in. Absolutely not. I'll be shocked if it is. But that doesn't mean that we can't get bounces in between. You know, as things don't only go up, things don't only go down. I expect most likely a bounce off of 620. Probably get some kind of bear rally, short-term bear rally. You know, that lines up with what I see currently happening here, and here. And I think that will happen. That's my current projection. We'll see if it does happen, of course. But again, even if that does happen, guys, I keep in mind, ultimately, we are still very much in a downtrend. So yeah, just be careful. Not financial advice, you know, don't be greedy, don't go into leverage, and don't be stupid. That's all I got to say. But other than that, guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.